Today, we're going to talk about some of the highs and the lows that come with weaning your breastfed baby. I'm also going to share with you actionable steps you can take to avoid certain struggles during the weaning process. Now, a quick disclaimer about me, I'm not a lactation consultant or specialist. I'm just a mom. I breastfed 2 babies pretty much exclusively and weaned them both around the 14 to 15 month mark. That's where I was comfortable being done with our breastfeeding journey. I will also say I chose to wean them. They did not self-wean. So this video might not be the right fit for you if you're wanting a baby to self-wean. Some quick thoughts and struggles you may face. Physically, lumps in your breast, you might have engorgement, you could struggle with mastitis or clogged ducts. One way to do that is by weaning very slowly. That's very, very important. I'm going to say that multiple times in this video. Another struggle could be your baby fighting it. And this one's kind of sad and it can be controversial. If your baby's fighting it, well, then they still need it and you should keep going. But for me, I was ready to be done and that was my choice. It was not my baby's choice. And again, that could be controversial. And it stinks because I know some people could come at me that breastfed for 2 years or 3 years and say, like, you didn't do enough. But then I look at moms who do a month or two and I'm like, I did really good. I made it 14, 15 months. So I'm proud of myself. I'm comfortable with where I stopped. There's always going to be somebody that did more than you or quote unquote was better than you. This is where I ended it and what I'm comfortable with. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion when it comes to weaning and what's best for their child. This is what I went with. So alongside your baby fighting it, you could also experience some heavy emotions with weaning. I was ready to be done, but I was also very sad to be done. I was sad in that connection, in that part of our parenting journey and relationship. I was definitely sad. I was sad with my first baby and my second. It didn't necessarily make a difference which child. On the first one, I knew I'd have more children and there'd be another time to breastfeed, but it still was sad. And actually, on my first baby, I felt weaning depression. So that's a struggle you may or may not face when you get pregnant. Huge influx of hormones. It's wild. You go a little crazy sometimes. You're crying, you're emotional, you're this, you're that. Then when you have your baby, there's obviously postpartum depression. You just delivered a baby and a placenta, your hormones are going crazy. I think the third time is with weaning, and I think for some people they experience it and some people don't. Just like with postpartum depression, some people experience it more than others. I felt a weaning depression coming on. I actually warned my husband. I was down to maybe like 1 or 2 feeds, maybe even just one, and I felt off. I felt down. And I knew part of it was the emotional breastfeeding journey ending, but I felt it more. I was like, I feel depressed. It was like just inside me. I was like, I feel down and just blah. And I gave him that warning. I said, like, I think this is happening. And then I did some Googling and I did find that it is a thing. So I was like, okay, validated. Anyway, gave him a warning and I told him to kind of just keep an eye on it and pay attention and be aware. So that was something that I let him know that I was going through. So those are some general struggles, or I guess the bad parts of weaning. I don't really have that many good parts. The good parts really are just kind of selfish, of just getting back to normal clothing and not having to work around the breastfeeding routine as much or schedule, having that freedom a little bit more to be away from your child if somebody needs to watch them, and just being done with that chapter in general, not being quite as tethered to your baby. It can be emotionally draining to be so tethered to your baby. And I know that's a really downer view on raising children. We should want to be with our children all the time, and that is great. But there are times where it's a lot and you do want a little bit of freedom, but breastfeeding really ties you to your children. So ending that, it was a little bit of like weight off the chest kind of feeling. So that may apply to you and it may not. So what is weaning going to look like in general? Everybody does it differently. I will say there's the early stages where it's kind of slow weaning, where your baby's getting introduced to food. They could be like 9, 10, 11 months. We're not intentionally weaning them at this point, but they might naturally be weaning. They might want to nurse less during the day. You might go from 6 or 8 nurses and dropping one, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, we kind of went a long stretch there. It's not supposed to be intentional under a year, but it can naturally happen. Now, as you're getting closer to ending and you're more consciously aware of your decision to wean, you might be coming up with a plan of how to do so, when you're going to drop these feedings, which order you want to drop them in. I dropped nighttime feedings first. That was my plan. Whereas some people might quit nursing all day and they only comfort nurse at night. I was not down for that. I was preferring to sleep through the night first. So that was my strategy with it. And then you're going to get down to the last feed, where which nursing session is the last one you're doing. You may do mornings, you may do evenings. I actually did the opposite with my babies. With my first one, if I remember correctly, I weaned everything except for that like 8 p.m. nurse before bed. That was the last one we cut out. With my second child, they seemed more attached to their morning nurse, and I believe that one was the last one I cut out. It's been a couple months now, so I got to remember correctly. But I actually did different strategies. For me, those 2 nurses were the most impactful of the day, is that morning bonding and that evening bonding. So those were where I ended it. And on that last feed, it does start getting emotional of like, okay, this is it. We're going to be done soon. And from going to that, starting to wean to this point, hopefully you've done it very slowly. You drop one feed at a time. You let your body adjust. It may be a couple weeks, it may be a few days, depending on your body. And you start getting more comfortable. You don't want massive engorgement where you're not comfortable and it's just ridiculous. That means you're going too fast and you need to slow down, honestly. And then you have that last feed. You may know it's the last feed, you might not, and that could be emotional. It can be really heavy. And then you've got the days after and even the weeks after. So you may feel engorgement after. Some people choose to pump, some people do not. I did not get my pump out. I just let myself naturally deal with it. And with one of my babies, I felt some engorgement when we were done, and the other one, I really didn't. So everybody can be different. Every experience can be different. Now I want to run you through a couple actionable steps you can take during this process. So these are the day-to-day things you're doing. So one of them is if you're trying to wean baby, consider wearing different clothing. Wear clothing that's more difficult to access. Maybe wear hoodies or just different items that you didn't typically wear around your baby or that make it more difficult to nurse where you are less likely to do so. Places in your home where you sit down. I always nurse my babies on the couch. So when I was weaning them and I needed to skip a feeding, I did not sit anywhere near that couch. We sat on the floor, we played in a bedroom, we did all sorts of different things to keep them busy and out of that location. Along with staying busy, you might go outside of the house more. You might go to parks, museums, the zoo, things that keep you moving, keep them distracted, again, during that feed that you're trying to drop or working towards dropping. You may also use different caregivers, such as grandparents during this time. You might want a little extra help if, you're trying to drop a 4 p.m. nurse before dinner. Maybe they come and hang out, or maybe you drop baby off there for a couple hours. You can involve dad and also slightly change your routines. For example, when I was trying to drop either the morning feeding or the nighttime feeding, dad took over. He took over on bedtime for about 2 weeks, and he took over on the morning wake up for about 2 weeks. And I sort of avoided baby during that window. We would even have breakfast sitting at the high chair ready to go. And then I go back in the bedroom, do my thing, get ready for the morning. And my husband goes, wakes up baby, comforts them, says hello, diaper change, outfit change, whatever they need to do. And then bring them into the kitchen, set them down to eat and help skip that morning feed. So you really can do actionable steps to help yourself out. Now, is there going to be tears and struggles? Potentially, yes. It does happen where they're sad and they just want to nurse. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's not. It just depends on how quickly and how strictly you want to wean. So it ultimately comes down to your choices, your decisions. I would say consistency, routine, those are very important, as well as coming up with plans. Like I said, how are we going to handle this morning drop? Have breakfast on the table. How are we going to handle the nighttime? Maybe you give them hugs and kisses. Maybe you kind of hide out in your bedroom. It's totally up to you how you handle it. So those are some of the good and the bads that come with weaning and some actionable steps that I recommend you take or consider. Do whatever fits your lifestyle and your situation. Good luck to you, and I hope it goes well.